just going to take a second as everything kind of spools up. We're excited, broadcasting live outside. Everything's happening. So again, we're just going to give it 1 second, let everything spool up. Now is that time. We all know new hunters. We all know hunters that might need a little advice, might need a little help in the woods. Right now is that time to hit that share button, bring in everybody to this conversation. This is the most polite way to tell a new hunter, hey, these are some things that you should do. So that's it. But all right, we're going to get tonight's show started. My name is Nate Zelinsky. I am here with Mr. Casey Westbrook. This is the Big Game Hunting Series brought to you by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. You have been following this along for months and months now. We literally started the show before the big game tags were on the primary draw, walked people through how to scout, how to select a unit, then how to apply for a license in that unit, and we've walked them through the scouting process. Our last live show was obviously talking about archery pronghorn, which in your unit you guys do a lot of. With that said, how's that going so far? Are hunters being successful out there?
Yeah, actually, it's been a pretty good year. It's we've got some moisture this year, which I thought might create some challenges.
That's what we were worried about. Is there like every water hole's full of water? And
yeah, well, and in my country, I can only speak to what I see mostly, but my country out in Elbert County, there's some great water holes, and then there's other water holes that are really reliable that totally dried out. So it's real patchy, but once you get it figured out, it's going real well. And
awesome.
The horn growth has been fantastic.
Well, that's great. That's what we're talking about, guys. That's what this show is all about. We want to make sure that we are bringing you the most cutting-edge, real-time information that we possibly can bring you just to make sure that you are successful in the field. So keep that in mind. This is all about your success when out there. Guys, we're moving some things around. I know you might think the cameras are going crazy. Again, we're just moving things around. This is live. So many times people see edited stuff. Again, we want this to be live to where we can interact with you. But again, you just heard from Casey. He's out there. You're out there outside of like Kiowa area, kind of running that eastern plains. And they are having some great success for that general archery pronghorn, so we're excited about that. And again, the main focus of tonight is talking about the very much anticipated archery elk and deer, basically the general season. Of all the archery hunts in Colorado, this is the biggest one. So it's your west of I-25. It starts on September 2nd. You're going to have, all the deer seasons taking place, the elk seasons taking place, as well as a lot of bear opportunity. And just in general, this is probably the biggest influx of hunters that you're going to see, at least in the beginning portion of the season. So we're excited about that. So that is tonight's show. We're going to be sitting here with literally a wildlife expert. We're both very much hunting enthusiasts. I mean, you've done game management on the wildlife side, in the mountains, on the plains, so very well rounded. I've hunted everything that you can possibly try to hunt. So between the two of us, I'm sure we can stumble upon some answers. But that is tonight's show, so we're going to cut right into it here in a second. But as always, to start this show, we do our introductions, but I promise this is about you, our viewers and listeners. We're going live from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Instagram page, as well as the Facebook page. I know we kind of got scattered there for a second, but everything is live, up and running right now. So this is about you. Below, feel free to comment and ask us questions. The gist of tonight is archery, elk and deer. We're going to talk about some bear stuff, but this is, again, your opportunity to ask us questions. You say, hey, I know it's not archery, but I have a question about a upcoming rifle. Doesn't matter. We're here to answer your questions to increase your odds out in the field, increase your success. So ask us questions. We also say this, again, I kind of joke about sharing it, but I know that there are so many new hunters out there that might be bashful to ask questions or don't even know that this is taking place. This is your resource to get your answers. So hit that share button. You can even tag those people and say, hey, Uncle Jim, we've been out hunting for 10 years and haven't got anything. It's time to change it up. Come into this conversation. So again, this is all about you. We just want to take the time because afterwards we always get flooded with comments and everybody's like, oh, question. I'm like, we're not live anymore. We do our best to answer those questions, but right now while we're live, we're going to talk for a couple minutes, and after that, it is going to be all about you. So right now, start hitting those comments up. Let's make sure that we get everything addressed, and let's start answering these questions. So we're excited about that. So bring on your questions. We got some audio? Perfect. So just move that phone up and get it off that mic and turn the volume up all the way. Working on one camera thing here, guys.
Sorry.
There we go. All right, we're going to do an audio test on our Facebook page there. How's that sound now? Checking audio on Facebook. Just want to see if everybody can hear. If everybody can hear me, give me a thumbs up. If we have good audio on Facebook, give me some thumbs up out there. Audio going good? Again, this is our test. Test audio.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're live again. Sorry about all the little kinks. Again, we are going live. It's all about that broadcast. But as we're saying, it's all about you, the hunter. We just want to make sure that we do everything possible to answer your questions. So with that, we're going to start off with kind of a concept, and then we're going straight to your questions. So now is the time. If that audio was goofed up, you didn't hear it, bring your questions. We want to make you a better hunter. It is all about live Q&A. So bring those comments right now. Ask all of your hunting questions. Now, to start this off, Casey, we're archery season. There's so many different opportunities within archery and so many different reasons to archery hunt. I want to ask you, as a hunter, why do you archery hunt? What do you love about it? What is the advantages, or what's the concept behind archery hunting for you?
Yeah, so archery means a lot of different things to me, and part of it is an opportunity to get out there early. I've been dying for months, right, to get out and go do something. And I do stuff all summer long, but it's just something different when you're out there trying to put yourself in the environment that the animal's with.
Absolutely.
And trying to experience kind of life through their eyes, right? Yep. So for me, that's a big part of it. I'm really big on the heritage part of it. I tend to be a little bit traditional just in my mindset. And so, the opportunity to go out and use more primitive equipment is a real big draw to me. And year to year, my goals change every year, right? So some years it's like, okay, man, it's time to finally go harvest something. And then other times it's like, you know what, man, I just want to go out and do some hiking, and I don't want to carry a 7-pound rifle.
Yep.
I want to carry some lighter weight gear and go out and just have some fun and see some new country, right? So that's kind of where I'm at.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess I would turn that question around on you and ask you the same thing,
Same thing. There's nothing more rewarding as a hunter, more for the dedication, the effort, the scouting, than to create that close quarters opportunity. I mean, not to say that rifle hunting's easy. I'm not trying to say that, because there's times where even when I have the rifle with me, I'm like, man, I just want to get one. But when you have to get into those extremely close quarters, when the wind matters more, when every branch breaks matters more, there's nothing more rewarding than to know that you put dedication in to pull off what is literally the ultimate hunt. So I think that, again, the respect that I give the animals, and more so the hard work and the reward you get from those hunts, I think is everything. We work with a lot of new hunters. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. So for new hunters getting in the field, or maybe even just new to archery, they might be 30-year hunters, but the opportunity that archery brings in of nice weather. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you how many times when I was a kid, you go rifle hunting and, you're chaining up the truck and you're getting stuck and you're freezing in the sleeping bag. And, it's just one of those things as to where, you can go on a t-shirt, in an archery season. So I think the warm weather for myself, I love for bringing my kids and, new hunters out. I love that aspect. And then lastly, I don't think you can overlook the fact that we're all busy, right? Yeah. Your schedule's busy. My schedule's busy. I don't know anybody today that I'm like, how's everything going on? They're like, oh man, I'm bored, I got nothing going on, right? It doesn't matter who you are, life is crazy nowadays, and to have 30 days, or 28 days, or whatever it is, to hunt rather than a 5 or 9-day hunt, it drastically helps. So I think the longevity of these hunts is one of those things that also is very rewarding for archery hunting in general. So yeah, on all aspects, from the actual hunt to what it offers, I don't think there's anything better than that.
It's a ton of flexibility, right?
Yep.
And it's flexibility in the length of the seasons. It's flexibility in what licenses you can get. Yep. Sometimes the archery license is easier to get than something else.
Absolutely.
Right? So, yeah, it's a huge thing, that flexibility for me too. And, the other thing, I guess, for me, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit too, is that respect for the animal.
Yep.
And for me, when I archery hunt, it is much more blending into the woods and being part of the environment versus a visitor to it,
Yep.
right? So for me, that's a successful day, is if I can be there and things go by and never know I was there, man, I won something, right?
Well, I agree.
did something right.
And I look at that, we talk about playing the wind as one of the biggest key elements to creating success, but I look at that, even if I don't even get close to the bull I want or the buck I want, getting in and out without blowing out the area is a success in general in itself. So there's so much to the archery hunts and what it is. And I got to say one thing here quick before this. We had a comment earlier that was actually about, I'm new to hunting, I missed all the draws, what do I do? And I think everybody that is new to the state of Colorado, or new to hunting, however you want to look at it, I think people are already like, oh man, can I hunt in 2022? But archery, like you said, with the OTC, the over-the-counter units available in Colorado, the amount of GMUs or game management units available to where you could go to any license agent right now. Like a Walmart type store, buy a license and go hunting on the 2nd is literally, I don't know the exact number, but there are tons of units. a good portion of all the mountain units are OTC. So that available opportunity that Colorado has is like no other. You can't go to any other state and have that opportunity. So especially in regards to archery. And honestly, the units that are over-the-counter archery can be as good and provide the quality animals, I guess we'll put it, on all bear, elk, and deer as some of the most premium draw units. I think everybody gets caught up in premium tags, and according to how long it takes to get the tag. But I've done more I've done more hunting and over the counter than by far any draw unit, and I've got some pretty good critters in that. So a lot of opportunity in over the counter.
Yeah, tons of opportunity in over the counter, and some of it is knowing the land or knowing, the scouting, doing some of those things, but it's not always about that either. Sometimes it's the work you're willing to put into it, right? So the biggest bull I've ever seen in my life was in not over the counter, but a unit you could draw every year, right? So, I mean, there are quality animals out there, and preference points and the amount of time it takes to draw that tag doesn't always reflect the quality of the animals that are out there, right? And I say that again, and this goes back to what I said earlier about different goals. So sometimes, I want to get something with large antlers. But sometimes I just want to be out there and be a part of it, right? And so maybe it takes a couple of years to learn a unit, and just being out there and being a part of it and learning the unit is success enough, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a totally valuable experience.
No, definitely. Awesome. Now, guys, remember, bring your questions. I know we have a couple on there right now. Before we get to that, I got to say my last comment about archery is the lifestyle, and that's what I want to touch base on. Not saying that it's good, not saying that it's bad, not saying anything about it, but when I rifle hunt, obviously, ammo is a little hard to find. Sometimes it gets expensive. In the rifle world, I don't find myself practicing. I mean, I practice. I do my ethical, blends to be a successful hunter. But I shoot a couple times. I get dial on my new rifle. I shoot to stay accurate. But archery, I find myself shooting every day. So all of a sudden, it becomes a behavioral aspect where I'm getting in shape. I'm true to my weapon. And honestly, it brings on this lifestyle that's fun as a hunter. The general archery hunter, you find yourself practicing more and getting into these routines. And it's just neat because all of a sudden I find myself doing it with my kids and my wife. And it just brings everybody into this collection of this outdoorsman and just enjoying the outdoors. And that's probably the last thing that I'd say that kind of top up why we love archery hunting is those styles that go with it. Now,
yeah, 100%, man. I totally immerse in these things, and obviously this is what I do for a living, so I'm lucky, right? But archery specifically, I subscribe to archery specific magazines.
Yep.
I don't really do that for rifle hunting.
I mean, that's it.
And part of it is, honestly, part of it is I'm studying different equipment and that kind of stuff. But a lot of it is just I connect with the stories that are in those kinds of magazines, right?
Absolutely.
I connect with those kinds of philosophies and thoughts, and so that means a lot, and it does. It impacts my family, as far as how we do this stuff, and it's not just pick up the bow a month before the season and call it good, and I don't have as much time as I wish I did, right? But what time I do have, I like to dedicate it to doing those kinds of things to increase my skill, to increase my ability to be out there and be ethical while I'm out there, right?
Absolutely. No, I agree. All right, we're going to jump some questions. As always, we just want to talk to you. We are all about engaging with you, our audience. So as you guys have questions, make sure you always bring them up. We are happy to answer them as much as possible online. Got any questions here?
Yes, but my Facebook phone crashed.
How's everybody doing this evening?
So I apologize.
No problem.
I can't get it to come back up. So we're just on Instagram.
All right,
right
we're
now.
going live from Instagram. Sorry to all of our, if everybody's on Facebook, if they happen to be on there, they're following us over on Instagram. We apologize that we did have a little loss there on Facebook, so we're going to work on that right now. But what questions do we have for Instagram?
So our first question that came in is, can they carry a sidearm while on archery hunting? I think this is a great one for Casey to answer for us.
Yeah, that is a great question about the sidearm, and it's something that comes up frequently, right? So there's nothing in Colorado law, as far as hunting and fishing goes, that overrides our Second Amendment.
Yep.
Right. So absolutely, you can carry a firearm. The cautionary part there is what's going to be intended for use, right?
Yep.
So you cannot, even if you shoot an animal with an arrow first, you cannot then walk up and use your handgun to put it down, right? So the most common way that question is phrased is, hey, I carry my handgun for self-protection, from lions, from bears, from two-legged human predators, right? Whatever it may be. We don't have an issue with that. So, the only other part of that is, the concealable part, and you start out with it on your hip where it's obvious, and then you start putting layers on and things start to disappear. So just make sure that those things are considerations.
More of a state law type thing more than a hunting law.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. So But as far as having it on your person, not a big deal.
Excellent. That's a great question. We appreciate it. That is honestly one that comes up quite a bit. And some people have it a part of their daily carry on a general basis, and they go in the woods. They just want to know what those regulations are. So
Absolutely.
definitely. Awesome. Any other questions there?
Yes, our next one is, can you just do a quick explanation of the elk antler point restrictions?
Absolutely. I love this question. Yep. Jump on it first.
Okay, so the actual definition in units that have an antler point restriction for elk is that it has to be 4 points or better, or a 5-inch brow tine. So that being said, there are some 3-point elk that have more than 5-inch brow tines.
Yep.
For me personally, and this is what I usually advise people, is it is way easier for me to look at a brow tine and say it's the length of the ear or longer,
Yep.
than it is to sit there and try and count points and then get my head back together, get the shakes out, and make an accurate shot. So I am very much an advocate of focusing on that brow tine.
Yep.
And like I said, we use the length of the ear as a good measurement.
That's perfect.
And that's usually what I give for advice. I don't know what you
Absolutely.
say.
Same thing, and as far as overall laws, it's one of those things we always refer to our big game brochure. So jump on the big game brochure, download the big game brochure, from Colorado Parks and Wildlife or CPW shop. But within regards to that, look up which units, number one, have it, because some units have no point restrictions, to where you can literally look at a spike as a legal take. But all your OTC units and other units are going to have that point restriction. So it is a 4 points on one side or a 5-inch eye guard. Again, talking about that eye guard or brow tine, those are the first points off that antler. Just kind of clarify that. We do see some out there that I've seen with no brow tines and 3 on top, and they're like, is it just the first point? If it's on the top of its antler, so again, it has to be that brow closer there. But I agree 100%. Look at the ears or look eye to nose. You just got to have some length there to make sure it has that 5-inch eye guard on regards to that. So, again, and I think that there's times where, it's like, it's questionable. We always talk about that. When anything is questionable, whether it's an eye guard, whether it's a legal bull, whether it's legal shooting light, if anything is ever questionable, make the good decision and go with the gut on the conservative side of pass it up. Nothing's worth any sort of violation. So again, kind of lead those ways.
Yep, I'd second that for sure.
Yep.
So this early on in the season, would you focus your attention on checking wallows or more spot and stock behavior?
Excellent. This is what. So we're talking here. Honestly, when you talk spot and stock and wallows, even though we refer to a wallow usually being all tied to elk, early season as we approach, we're talking about elk, we're talking about deer, talking about bear. They're all going to kind of lean to tactics that are good. Why we are at this point? Why don't we break down all three? So, Casey, I'll start with you. When we're talking elk, you're getting up there September 2nd, opening day. Walk me through how you're going to start your hunt.
Yeah. So water is a godsend in Colorado, right?
Absolutely.
We're a dry, arid state, so water's always good, whether it's an actual used wallow that's all muddied up or not, or it's just a clean water hole. It's got value to it. So I'm always a fan of water. But beyond that, I think I'm looking for other things too. I'm looking for areas that are cool.
Yep.
This time of year, we're talking about how nice the weather is to be out hunting, right? But it's also kind of strenuous because it's so hot. So, a lot of folks talk about you got to go to higher elevation. You got to get up high. That's where the elk are at. In some units, that's very true.
Yep.
In other units, there is nowhere high. So then you're starting to think about, well, maybe I should be hunting in these shaded bowls that are on the north-facing slopes, right?
Yep.
And then tying that together with the water, what's the travel corridor between the two, right?
Yep.
And so some of it's time of day and those kinds of things, but if I can find water, I'm pretty much going to start on water.
Absolutely.
So that's my advice.
I agree, and in regards to that, water is always safe, and that's probably one of the biggest things that I always talk about is how safe water is. So you look at elk hunting in general, you have hunting water holes is a great technique. You have spot and stock, great technique, and then you obviously have the one that we all want to do is calling elk, right? We all want to be standing there, and we want to have this mature bull breaking through the trees, growling at you. I mean, I don't care how many elk I've called in, it still gets to me. I mean, your knee starts going, you're like, oh, just control yourself. It's just one of those things that always gets to you. We all want that experience, but I always tell myself when I go into the field, I let the elk tell me how I'm going to hunt, and that's 100% it. If I'm in a situation where I've been scouting and I know that these animals are, hey, I know they're coming out of their feeding grounds, going to their bedding grounds, I know that they're going to be on a path, I can time that spot and stock, great. hey, I know that there's a single bull above tree line. I can make that stalk. So if they're lending themselves to behavior in areas that are conducive to spot and stalk, I do that. But again, if you know where you have an active water hole, I mean, I guided hunts for 10 years, and I always told people, if you 100% want a bull, if you dedicate to water, there's nothing better. Now, I will say this as a tip to everybody here following: when you hunt water, it is almost always a dedication. You talk to guys that hunt water and they jump on it for 3-4 hours one day, and then they hunt it the next day for a couple hours. I hate to say it, it's the worst thing you can do. When you hunt water, I don't care how many trail camera pictures you have of that bull there at 4 p.m. You hunt it from sunup to sundown. But if you hunt water sunup to sundown for multiple days in a row, you will be successful. These animals have to drink, and honestly, the heat is bad now, right? So they're drinking because they're thirsty. As the rut approaches, they are only going to drink more and more and more. People think as it gets colder, it slows down, but as the rut increases, the bulls get more active, burning up more energy, and a lot of times they might even double their water intake. So that water becomes extremely conducive. So water is everything. So if you can find that and have an active hole, it's the greatest way to success. Now, we want to touch base on calling real quick. So again, we've done the live feeds, we've been talking about it. Every time we've ever gone live, we have questions about calling. Because I mean, it's what we want to see. You turn on the TV, calling. We all watch our Primos videos and stuff before the hunt. It's just one of those things that it's the greatest experience a hunter can have. But if you go out there right now, I mean, I was out the other day, I heard bugling. I'm not going to try to tell people they're not talking. I'm hearing some bugling, I'm hearing some cows, I'm definitely hearing some activity. But is the rut on? No. I mean, some extremely high country, you might have a couple cows, starting to release some hormones where you're getting some bugles, but it's really not on right now. So what I tell every hunter, and this is important, and I think you'll agree, if you go into a hunting season and you overcall too early, all you're doing is getting these animals used to your noises, used to hunters calling. They know things aren't right, and you're literally hurting yourself for the future. So when I go into the woods on opening day, my rule on calling is if they're talking, I'm talking. If they're not talking, I am not talking. If you follow that rule, I promise you, it might not be as fun to hunt them right now, but later in the season, you're going to have a great time. It is easy to burn out an area early by overcalling these animals. It's natural. They live in that environment. They know when they're not talking. I always, phrase it like this. If you got on the highway to go home and you saw a car driving backwards, you'd be like, look at that. I noticed that. It's weird. That's the same thing as you walking through the woods just nonstop on the bugle tube. The animals are like, what is that? We've been sitting here for, 6 weeks straight. We haven't heard a bugle. What's that? It throws them off. It's a red flag. So if they're talking, absolutely. I always am on the subtler end, but call back to them. But if the woods are silent, you should always be silent and go at it more with the spot and stalk or water hole hunting. So those are some tips on the calling aspects. Again, it's a great thing to do. You want to have it in your tool belt. You want to know how to call, but let the animals start that conversation.
100%. Yeah, there's a couple things on calling. So just in general, I work pretty hard at knowing the areas I want to hunt, right? So the last thing I want to do is on the first day go in there and screw it up for the rest of the 30 days, right? For the next 29 days. So I tend to be fairly conservative anyway. We've actually just recently, this is the first year where we shifted our archery season.
Absolutely.
And part of that was a demand from hunters, and part of that was we're not hunting the rut like we used to be, right? So there's different theories and philosophies out there. Some of it is, there's environmental changes, whatever, but I'll be honest, I've been in the state my entire life, and it seems to me like the calling has diminished from the natural calls from the elk. And I cannot sit here and not believe that there's got some correlation with the number of people out there with the calling right? As calls got more prevalent, the natural response of the animals seems to have dropped a little bit. Can't prove that, that's my theory, right? But the other part of that is everybody goes, how do these animals know when it's hunting season? Like they're there all the time, and then all of a sudden hunting season, they're all gone. Get up there on a Thursday afternoon and sit where you're gonna camp. And what do you see all night Friday night? Is cars rolling in, right? I mean, it's like you said, a car driving backwards on the highway. That's a clue. Something's not right, right? So the calling is the same way. If they haven't heard just, one herd and another herd bull kind of talking back and forth a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's 10 other bulls calling, something's up, right? So I would agree 100% with you. Be a little bit conservative and mimic what they're doing. Don't try and force them to do what you want.
I mean, that 100%. And honestly, in regards, we watch the videos and in some of these videos, it might be a different environment. You know, we're hunting over the counter. We're hunting general public land. You know, we're parking in the parking lot of 5 other cars, or we're doing our hunt. We're not on a very managed ranch to where everything's in our favor. So the two things: be subtle, absolutely, and give them more time to come in. I think that's the other thing is I know hunters that will have a bull working, and they're like, "Why isn't he here?" In the video, he mowed over 15 trees coming here, and I'm like, hey man, they're a little more nervous coming in this situation.
Yeah.
So again, not saying it's not going to be like the TVs for you, but again, come in a little bit more subtle. It's still going to work out for you. Just really come into it with a lot of focus on hand. That's going to help you out. Now, switching gears, talking about deer hunting. So I know so many hunters that really get into it, and when they first get into archery, so many times they get into deer first because they're like, it's not as big of an animal. It's a very great animal for me to start with. But when we talk about spot and stalk deer hunting with a bow, what's your play? How are you going to go after a deer in Colorado with archery equipment?
So, I mean, that's kind of a wide question, right?
Yeah.
But my technique, typically, is get up high and watch a basin below me.
Yep.
And what's cool about mule deer versus whitetails, right? Whitetails are real skittish, and once they bolt, they're gone. They're like an elk, right? But with mule deer, you got a little bit more forgiveness.
Yeah.
But I like to get up high, like to see where they're going. If I can be that patient, which is one of my struggles, right, is to hang tight and let them get solid, let them get rock solid. So not trying to go stalk them while they're necessarily up browsing for the day, but let them actually get settled in and bed down and kind of settle themselves to where I know I've got 45 minutes to get there, or an hour, or 3 hours, versus he's going to be at that rock in 15 minutes. I got to run. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's kind of my thing is to sit back and just watch, and again, kind of let them dictate the pace, right? If it's one of those days, a rainy day or something like that, where they're never sitting down, I have to adapt to that. But in this heat, let them lay down and then kind of follow in. And it's the other part of that is, and this kind of goes back to my roots of where I started, right? Is it's awesome to have a buddy back there to give me hand signals. I don't like texts. I don't like the technology stuff, and not for any legal reason, but more so because I can't rely on it. But a buddy up there on the rock with glasses going this way, giving me signals, as long as I know what he's saying, that's fail-proof.
Yep.
So
and with that, I do have to say, like, the general, everybody's like, draw. I mean, there's nothing better when you look at your buddy. You're like, oh, he's that close. He's that close. But talking to archery elk, or actually the archery deer, I think you're 100% right. Water is also another key thing. So if I do have a water hole where they're drinking, great. And it's funny because I will go into a deer area with the focus exactly what you said. I always literally am an observer. If I see the biggest buck I've ever seen at 7 a.m. and he's on his feet, everybody's like, go after him. I'm like, I gotta let him bed, because your odds of sneaking up on that deer are like slim to none. So I let these animals bed 100%. So I watch them bed, and then I make my play. Now, two things. One, I let them bed, I let the sun get hot. You'll see them start to do the old head drop. You'll see them get tired. And your odds of approach are great. As it gets later in the day, so let's just say I'm watching them in the average morning, they bed down at 9 a.m. I'll give them till 10, 10:30, 11. Let those thermals get very conducive. Whether they're going up, down, sideways, but generally speaking, your thermal's going to suck up. Let those thermals get very consistent to where you're not going to get blown in wind. Let that deer get so warm and fuzzy, let them start drowsing off, and then you make that approach. The other nice thing about that, I can't tell you how many times where I've literally watched 4 or 5 deer, so I'm like, okay, that one's there, this one's there, that one's there. So after I ruin that one, then I sneak over and I hunt this one, and it's a lot of fun in those regards. So that's it. And I had a buddy who we saw some deer going into trees. He's like, how you gonna approach that one? I'm like, I'm not. And I had a buddy that was literally almost getting upset with me because he's like, we gotta hunt that deer. I'm like, we're not going to sneak up on a mule deer in the trees. It's just not. Like, we need to know within a foot of where they're at. So I literally build my entire hunt on planning on watching them bed down and making my approach that way. And I encourage that to all the archery deer hunters out there. Literally sit. No matter how excited you get by seeing deer in the morning, watch where they bed, pinpoint where they're bed, and make a play midday. It's a lot of fun, but it's also probably the best way to create that success.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, the patience is the hard part, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's true in a lot of this hunting stuff. But if you can restrain yourself, you're going to get rewarded, whether you get the deer or not.
Yep.
Just the quality of the stock, and then you have something to measure. Okay, how did I blow it?
Yep.
And how do I make it better next time?
Absolutely.
Versus going into the trees and it runs out the other end, and you might hear it,
Yeah.
but you never see it, so you don't even know what you did wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
You never know how close you got or any of those situations.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. All right, now before we jump into a couple more questions, I know we're kind of stacking up. We got a bunch of questions, but with this, my other question, bear. I think it's one of those things that in the last couple years, the opportunity to acquire a bear license, especially when accompanying an elk or a deer tag, is easier than it's ever been. There's more opportunity to hunt bears in Colorado than there ever has been. I mean, it's funny because there's certain situations on the Front Range, especially private land, where you can get a List C tag, where you can have unlimited bear tags, basically, for an example. I talked to people in other states. My friend from Wisconsin, he just got a tag this year in 15 years. And he's like, I can't believe I got out of 15, So we have this opportunity. But in Colorado, if you're new to the state, if you're watching this, not to say that we're primitive, but we don't have a spring season, we don't run dogs, we don't have bait. So we're spot and stalking these animals. How would you approach a bear hunt here in Colorado?
So bears beyond any of the others for me is water, right? You're not going to sneak up on a bear, and if you do and it runs away, you're not even going to hear it run away, right? So water is huge for me. And there are guys that talk about different food sources, and there's validity in that.
Yeah.
But you have to know pretty much exactly which food source they're on, because you'll have a year where there's total failure, right?
Yep.
And it's really hard to find any food for them. Or you'll have a year where a lot of this, the Front Range part of the state, the western part's not so much, but we've had a lot of rain on the Front Range. So we've got acorns, choke cherries, plums. We got all kinds
raspberries,
of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so which one are they hitting? We don't know, right? So you gotta find the right one. So water is a constant, for sure. And again, and this is again for me, right? I know that I like to get up and walk around.
Oh, yeah.
So having something where I can sit there and watch and know they're coming helps me with my patience, right? If I'm sitting on a plum thicket, well, this one's okay, but grass is always greener on the other side. That plum thicket over there might be better, right? So I end up moving, and then I screw myself up. So, yeah, without a doubt, for me, bears are all about water.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. I've spent hundreds of hours literally trying to sneak through acorn thickets, because it's fun because it brings on archery style, because you come around the corner and you're 10 yards. And I've had some success within that. I've had some success calling, but nothing like water. They're same thing. They have to drink. It's very, very one of those opportunities. The nice thing is, once you get a bear on a water hole, they're very conducive to come back. So you walk up to the average wallow, you see an elk track, you're like, cool, one drink here. You can sit there for a week and they may or may not come back. You walk up to a water hole and you have bear tracks, more than likely that animal will return to that. They're very good about returning to those good water holes that they find. So finding a key water hole is huge for that bear. So I agree 100%. So that's your general archery topics as far as elk, deer, bear. It all starts September 2nd. Within that, let's go to some questions here real quick. What questions do we have about any of the stuff that we've talked about, or some new topics?
Yeah, you've been talking a lot about the difference in habitats of where to find animals, and this person is asking about different behaviors or better dark timber versus aspen for finding animals.
So that could come into play a lot of different ways, right? So I mentioned earlier talking about the temperature differences, right? So if it's hot, generally your dark timber stuff is going to be a little bit cooler, right? So that's where I would consider looking as a bedding area generally, right? Obviously the aspens, that might be a better feeding area because it's a little more open and you got more grass growing and those kinds of things. So it can be a little bit seasonal, but I'd say relative to archery, that's kind of how I view the world. I don't know how you look at it.
Absolutely. So I would say in the general hunting situation, talking about trees and what you're looking for, I'm almost 99.99% hunting them on their feet. So once they go to their bedding grounds, they are safe from the world, at least for me. I'm not saying that that's like a rule to follow, like a legality, but once they bed down, you're not going to pull them up out of your bed with a call. Once that bull lays down, I don't care how sweet you can be with that call, he's not getting up. Sneaking up on a bull in their bed, more than likely is not going to happen. So I let them have that downtime. So I hunt them on their way to their bed. Once they bed down, they're safe for me, and then I hunt them when they get back up out of their bed. As far as what that bedding material is, I see, the animals that I'm hunting, the the average mountain elk, I'm seeing them bed down in that dark timber until that temperature gets cold. When you start getting into that maybe second, third rifle season, fourth rifle season, generally speaking, on an average year, I'd say it's third rifle. This year our seasons are later, so it's going to start a little earlier, but it's got to get extremely cold before I see these animals starting to bed out in the open. Once it gets very, very cold, 20 below, then you will see them bedding on aspen hills because they still feel safe, like they have structure, but the sun gets through and warms them up. So I see extreme bedding in dark timber until it gets extremely cold, and then it's pretty much moving to the aspens. But as far as what I'm looking to hunt them in, I hunt them wherever they're at. I wish I could say I'm going to do this, but wherever that bull is that I like, or the bull that I choose to pursue, whatever it can be. But it's all about the key opportunities of when that animal presents that opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think I'd build on that and say, using maps is huge. And honestly, we're not a society really that uses maps like we used to, right? But a good topo map will help you pinpoint those moving corridors, right, between the two. And so, the trees correlate with the slopes a lot of times, right? But if you're looking at that north slope that's got a lot of thick timber in it, that's that bedding area. We talked about before, not going in there and ruining all the pre-work you've done by busting them out. You can bust them out of feeding zones and not ruin an area.
Yeah, I 100%.
You bust them out of beds, you're done.
Yep.
That's it.
I could not agree more. If there's one thing you take from that tonight, that's it. Because their bed is their sanctuary to be. I would have to have an animal hit before I walk into the bed. And people are always like, man, how do you know good? I'm like, man, I barely go in them. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just that sanctuary. So I couldn't agree more. So hopefully that helps out as far as what you're kind of looking at as far as terrain goes.
And you touched on it a little bit, but how would an animal's behavior change summer versus fall, and then maybe into the early winter months?
Yeah, so again, influences on that are going to be, food availability, temperature, hormonal, right? The rut, like we've been talking about. And this is one of those things that I actually find myself telling people this, and it's about when you're out scouting in the summer, right? If you're finding fresh elk sign, good for you.
Yep.
But realistically, other than a really early archery, that's probably not going to do you much good, right? So don't necessarily be looking for the freshest elk sign. Look for the elk sign that correlates with where you want to be when you want to be there, right? And so if you're going to be a later rifle hunter, maybe you are looking for a sign that's closer into that more open where they can get some sun, that kind of thing. We've got some seasons that go all the way into January. Those you probably ought to be looking at some of these open sagebrush flats, right? So you got to kind of think about what their needs are and what the weather's doing. Yeah, where they're going to be versus where they are right now.
Absolutely. And with that, kind of talking about just kind of movements, things like that. Just general things to kind of think about. Number one, mule deer. I always say, I don't care where you're at, what happens, once the velvet comes off, things change. Yeah. So your patterns right now, if these mule deer have their velvet on right now, this pattern will continue during archery and into the first hint of muzzleloader. Once the velvet comes off, which could be as early as maybe September 7th, 8th, could be as late as maybe the 16th, 18th. I always say September 12th to the 13th, kind of that magic zone where that velvet comes off. I don't know what happens. I mean, obviously it's hormonal, but when the velvet comes off, things change. Now, if you're a person that has no idea where the deer are at, no patterns, it's the greatest thing that happens for you because all of a sudden you're going to find deer. Right. If you have a pattern on a big buck, get that animal, try to get it harvested as soon as you can. Once the velvet comes off, things change. So as far as seasonal patterns, that's the number one. Since we're talking mainly archery tonight, deer. Once the velvet comes off, things change. When you start seeing other deer lose their velvet, know you have a changing pattern come. With elk, I talked to a lot of hunters this week that have two different things happening. I talked to hunters this week that said, I'm only finding cows. Even though that's frustrating, as the rut approaches, that's a very good thing because that's where you want to be. I know other hunters that are like, hey, I'm only seeing bulls. Is that weird? And my advice is the same thing. If you can get it done in the first couple days, season starts on the 2nd, you're going to have maybe a week, maybe just a day or two to hunt these animals. But once love's in the air, the bulls will move to find the cows, not vice versa. The cows aren't going to make a major migration to find the bulls. The cows are going to stay put. The bulls are going to migrate. So again, major change. Like you said, it's hormonal, but just know that if you're seeing bulls and no cows, I wouldn't necessarily say give up on them because you're going to have a couple days of hunting them. But in time, those patterns will break. and do that. And the last thing we talked about it during scouting, but on the elk side, we see a pretty heavy influence of kind of slight behavior of how bulls summer and winter. I always say that I see it a lot to be very similar. If a bull summers with 1 or 2 other bachelor bulls, so it's like a group of 3, 4, he'll winter in a smaller group. If he is summering with 15, 20 bulls, he will winter with that type group. A lot of their behaviorals as an individual animal will repeat summer versus winter. I'm not necessarily that's telling you where they're going to be, but it's just a good idea of understanding that. So again, if you do a lot of scouting in summer and you find certain values and certain bulls, you can learn a lot about kind of how the behavior will work a little bit later in the season. So kind of keep that in mind. That'll help you out with that. So guys, we're starting to get light, so we're going to keep going a little bit longer. Again, this is our Instagram audience. We're going to take a few more questions and we're going to kind of start wrapping it up, but let's end it with a few more questions. As always, this is about you, so don't be bashful. Bring your questions. We've got a very intelligent person here helping us out with that. So
you guys have mentioned elk rut quite a bit. For the new hunter, could you walk somebody through a little bit more detail on when does the rut begin? How long does it last? What's the behavior in order to know when you're in or out of rut?
You want to start or you want me
we'll both take stabs at it. I mean, honestly, the biggest question, so, I host a radio show on the weekends. Every single week, everybody asks, tell us when the rut's going to start. And I'm like, man, I would not be, a hunting content provider if I knew those type answers. It changes, you know what I mean? Everybody talks about early rut, a late rut. So much goes into it, and I mean, you could ask 10 people and get 10 different answers as far as what controls the rut. And you can tell me right now that you don't have a theory, but I know you do. I tell people I don't have a theory, and I have a theory. I always say if it's a dry year, a cold year, the second I get wilted grass, I think that's Mother Nature's sign to tell them it's time to start getting ready for winter, and I see the slight early phases of the signs coming through to where that rut's going to start. If I see all of a sudden a super green, wet year, grass is thick all the way in the high country, I think those animals wait a little longer. But in reality, it's the female, the cows that control that entire rut phase. It's when they actually are cycling to be a breedable animal that truly is going to kick things off. Now your bulls, they're going to bugle and do their thing. They're excited. But the true rut is actually the breedable stage. And honestly, it's crazy how small that window is. The cow goes into true breedable stage for 48 hours, and it's every 12 days. It is a very narrow window, but hopefully you have enough animals cycling in and out that it helps that. But that truly, the rut is a narrow window when the cows are breedable and the bulls are trying to gather those harems and breed, kind of accordingly. But what's your take on the whole rut thing? Again, we could do a 5-hour seminar on elk rut.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we haven't talked about this at all, right?
No.
But I see it a lot the same way. I think of it as nutritional,
Yep.
right? So those cows, their bodies know when they're nutritionally fit to start having their best chance at reproduction. That's really their goal in life, right? Pass these genes on.
Yep.
So, and this is one of the reasons I really enjoy the archery stuff again is because you get to kind of intertwine nature all together, right? So to me, this isn't even really a question about studying the elk. This is a question about studying their food, their forage,
Absolutely.
right? So their nutritional health makes the difference. And so, as far as the actual triggering the female estrus, that's what I believe it is.
Yep.
And it does vary year to year, wet years versus dry years. I think your summary is a great summary of it. The other part of that is when we hear that question, what we're really being asked is, when was my best chance at calling in a bull? Right?
Exactly.
And I guess the truth is it's going to fluctuate, but the bulls are going to be susceptible outside of, because every cow is going to be a little bit different, right? So there's going to be a bigger window for those bulls, and I am personally I kind of buy off on the moon phase thing. So I think moon phase has a lot to do with it. And so, again, to me it is being out there enough to let the animals tell you when the time is right. So can we say generally third week of September-ish? Probably, right? But really it's about being out there to know what's going on, or studying it to know what's going on. And if you can't be out there, maybe your buddy can, right?
Yep.
Make a phone call, find out, talk to people, and do it that way. There's nothing wrong with, as a hunter, going back to camp, seeing another camp over there and going, hey, how you doing? I want to introduce myself. And Lord, you might actually make a friend, but you also get some intel, and they're getting intel from you, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Now we're going to kind of wrap up some of this. I have a couple of questions for you, but talking about the best opportunity, like you said, you kind of tied that in there. As far as when can I call in a bull, I'm going to walk you through a couple things that are going to help you increase that success. So number one, you have to ask yourself your goals. So as an archery hunter, are you going for the herd bull, the biggest bull in your unit, or are you just trying to get a legal bull? So I ask people that because everybody's like, when should I hunt? But in reality, I ask that question. So if I want the biggest bull possible, I literally hunt these animals in about a 3-day window. And my 3-day window is when they go from a bachelor bull in summer to saying, you know what, I should probably gather some cows. At that point in time, they're vulnerable. They're looking for cows. I can cow call my way into that bull. It makes that bull approachable because he's looking for cows. Those bulls literally it takes, some days it takes an hour. But I always say it's a 3-day window. But within 3 days, I promise you, he will have a harem. Whether he's choosing to have a small group of 6 to 8, breeding those and then gathering more as those bulls or as those cows get bred. But either way, they will have a harem very quickly. Once there's a harem, it is hard to call in those big bulls. I watch guys that say the same thing. They're like, man, we're going to get out there late September. That's where they're all bugling. And you are right, 100%. You want to hear more calling. The later you get, the better it gets. But you walk into a bull that once he starts breeding cows, you're on the second phase of the estrus. So you're on the second breedable stage of the cows. All of a sudden, they might have 30 cows in a group. That bull knows he is happy. So that bull is sitting there. He's got 30 cows around him. You bugle at him. He's like, I'm not going to leave these 30 cows for you. Now, in Estes and on these ranches where everything's cold out, maybe. But where you and I are hunting, where the audience is hunting, that bull is going to be content. But I tell people, if you're looking for a legal bull, that's when the satellites lose their mind. So big bulls, I hunt when they first start gathering cows. If I'm just looking for a legal bull, I love it when it's in that peak rut phase. Because I can get on the outskirts, I can do some cow calls, and this little satellite's like, there's a loose cow, I'm going to get her. And they come charging in. So a lot of those opportunities. And then lastly, the thing I talk about with general success, and you can tell me if you agree or not, morning versus afternoon. That's probably one of the questions we get so much. Hunt when you can hunt, right? Your schedule, we're busy. I hunt morning and night. But if I look back at the, say 20 bulls that I've killed archery equipment here in Colorado, majority have been in the evening. So in the morning, everything is rushed. These bulls are breeding their cows all night. They're rutting, they're working the cows, they are burned out. Come morning, everybody says the same thing. They're like, man, I was hunting him, I was right behind him, he was calling to me, and he went up the hill and I just couldn't quite catch him. He was answering, trying to gather his cows, but by no means did he really have that much interest. All he wanted to do was put his cows to bed. So the morning hunt is rushed because all they want to do is bed down. Now you have the afternoons. They bed down for 4, 6, 8 hours. When it wakes up from their afternoon, nap time we'll call it, but when they get out of their beds, they know from that point until the next morning they are breeding. So in the afternoon, there is no rush. They are now aggressive. They've had their resting point. They usually get a drink of water, and they know that it is now time to seek out those cows for a breedable stage. So that's when they are far more conducive to come into a cow call, or you approach them with a cow call, which is probably underestimated. Instead of making them do the work, you just be the cow and wander your way in. But again, the afternoons for me are so much more successful. So when I tell people, yes, I pursue them in the morning, but I am very cautious not to blow them out. You know what I mean? I'm staying with them, I'm watching where they're bed, but my mornings end up being nothing more than a scouting mission. And I'm like, he's there, I'm going to get my wind right. When he gets up, I know where he's going to be. And again, your overall success rate in the afternoons are far better. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And I think there's a couple things that play into that, right? And really, some of it is your personal comfort in the woods.
Yep.
Because that means you're coming back in the dark, and I mean in the dark, right? And I don't know about you, I don't like headlamps as much as I can avoid that. That's just one more signal that something's there that shouldn't be. So you got to be familiar with that area and be willing to come out in the dark.
Yep.
That's a personal comfort level. And then the other thing is your proficiency and your comfort and knowledge that you've done the practice you need to do, right? Because, and I know this is maybe me speaking for me, but I think it's other people too, that my worst fear is that I somehow make a horrible shot at last light, and then I've got to spend that whole night going, oh man, what's going to happen? Not being able to have any idea what happened, right? And then beyond that is, if it takes me till noon the next day to find it, then what do I find?
Absolutely.
And so there's another incentive to be proficient.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But I do, as far as success, I think you're right on the money. And you know, you're right. The middle of the day is about the most rest they ever get as far as a bull goes.
Yep, that's it. It's a one opportunity. Now, we're going to kind of wrap it up here in the last 5 minutes, and we got a lot of questions. I promise you, if we did not answer your question live, we will jump to it here at the end. We'll comment on it. We'll create some more content, and we'll start with those as we get in live. But as a wildlife officer, you've seen it all. You've seen the great, you know, people that do the research. They know they're all within legal. You see a lot of guys that maybe let some excitement get to them. Regardless, everybody on here, we all want to have a successful hunt, right? And success is everything from a harvest on the ground to just getting out there and enjoying nature. But on your side as a wildlife officer, what do you see? Walk me through, hey, sign your license, here's how you tag some stuff, to some things that maybe people will do wrong they don't know they even did wrong. So walk me through a couple of the more the legal side to make sure we all have a good hunt out there.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a couple of things. Obviously, our first priority is human safety,
Yep.
right? So that's what some of our rules are. And so I think understanding where some of these rules come from
Yep.
is important to then being able to go, oh, I need to do this, right? So we got the public safety thing, and then we got the wildlife management thing. So specific to licenses, you know, when you get your license, especially if you get it through the mail, if you're buying it at Walmart, they should tell you that you need to sign it. But what you're signing there is a statement that says, this is me, right? And it's important because we need to know that the right person has the right license, and that way we're not having somebody overharvest, take beyond their bag, those kinds of things, right? So signing that license not on the carcass tag, but above the carcass
There's two
tag.
signatures on your license.
Yes, there's two pieces. So that first piece is the top part, and there's a signature line for it. The second piece is the carcass tag, and it's just a single panel, if anybody's seen our license. And that part needs to be signed and dated and marked out the sex and all those things and attached to the carcass, right? And the purpose of that is really to keep somebody from wandering animals, is how I phrase it, right? So again, it's about making sure that we are equally sharing the resource that we have and that we're managing it appropriately. We set our license numbers with an expected level of harvest. And we do that in order to maintain this awesome resource for the future, right? So that is what that is for. It's not just something we make you do to make you do it, right? So it's an accountability thing that we can say, okay, our management, our harvest estimation is appropriate, and then it's an accountability thing to make sure that we can come back and go, okay, this animal came from this person in this time, and those kinds of things, so that we can tie all that together. So again, it's not just to be difficult. So those are important.
And with that said, we always say this. I mean, again, you're endorsing the actual license part. The carcass tag is separate. Upon harvest, well, literally, I shoot an animal. You know, I create that harvest. I walk up. You know, I mean, before you get excited with pictures and everything else, first thing, carcass tag. Endorse it. Sign it. Take your knife. You're marking out. You're marking the month. You're marking the date. You are marking male, female. So mark all of those things, and you're actually notching it with your knife, cutting that out, and then I immediately attach it to the animal. You know, there's a lot of things about transportation. If it's on the animal right there, nothing goes wrong. It makes everything simple. Excitement comes over everybody. You start to forget, oh, I'm going to do it after pictures. Oh, I'm going to do it after I clean it. I'm going to do it after I get to the truck. It just is more things. It gets lost in your pocket. Attach it, there's usually no issue. So I just really kind of highlight those type of things. Now, what else do we have as far as just some legality things that you see?
So evidence of sex is probably the next big one, right? And sometimes that's from a slip of the knife. I knew what I was doing and I accidentally cut it off. Sometimes it's I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it.
We'll do it on the next link.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So and that's the thing, especially with male animals. Well, male and female. I try and save evidence of sex on both hindquarters in case I screw one up. Right. But that is a big one. And so just having some understanding, and I don't know how much we want to get into detail or how much time we've got for that, but there's a lot of videos. I mean, YouTube, right? We all talk about it, but it's a good thing, man. There's a lot of good advice out there on how to do that stuff. So that's probably the next big one is evidence of sex. Beyond that, then we get into some things where it is about transportation. You know, I kill an elk and you haul it home for me. And how we do that appropriately, or if I want to donate some meat to somebody, how do I do that appropriately? And those things, you know, they're in the brochure. I will give you that the brochure is not always very clear, right? There's always another way you could read that and make it fit something else. But if there's doubt, man, ask. You know, we're a phone call away. You can get on the internet. I know that not everything that comes off of a forum is always accurate. But generally, the common consensus is going to be pretty close to right. I agree. Right. So those are some, I guess, the more common ones that we come up with. You know.
I agree 100%. I think the biggest thing: make sure your license is there. Make sure your license is for the unit you're at. Grab that big game brochure. Just check. My license says this unit, Am I in this unit? Is that license valid for that unit? Just make sure those little things, make sure it's endorsed, make sure the evidence is sex. Again, I keep it on both legs. We can walk you through a whole other video on that. I know it's getting dark here. But again, make sure that evidence is sex. Just make sure all of it. And honestly, even though, you know, you've hunted here your whole life, I've hunted here my whole life, I read that big game brochure every year. It's unbelievable how much you're like, man, I've read this 10 times, I still didn't pick that up. Just read through it. It's one of those things that you're going to be in tune, because again, success comes from a legal hunt. Success comes from a successful harvest. Just comes from having fun. So keep all of those things in mind. All that's going to lead to a better hunt. We're going to wrap up the show right now, but with this, my last final comment, we are all in this together. And I want to say that because more and more, the archery hunters, there's so many of us that I don't like this guy because he beat me to the spot. I don't like this guy because he beat me up the trail. And this guy blew up the elk, so now I'm mad at him. Then the muzzleloaders come in, and you're like, he's a muzzleloader. He's wearing orange in the middle of my... We're all laughing right now, but it is so serious, it's unbelievable. We are not united as an outdoor group. And I mean that from everything from, I'm a photographer, I like to take pictures of the fall colors of leaves. We all enjoy the outdoors, and we all need to get along a little better than we're doing. And I know that, again, it's one of those things that we laugh at, but I can't tell you how much that I see it every time I'm in the woods. We're not united. So when you see other bow hunters, you see muzzleloaders, you see people just enjoying walking their dog. They have as much a right to be on the trail as you do. Really, this coming hunting season, with these final thoughts, have common courtesy in your mind. When you pass somebody taking pictures, don't kick up dust. When you see another bow hunter, hey, he's going up that canyon, I'm going to go up this canyon. Let's not fight over things. Let's have that common courtesy in the woods. I think that will be a major step in just a lot more opportunity. We don't want to see things get shut down. We don't want to see tighter restrictions, because we can't get along. We see it year in year. We're starting to see to where, there's some closures in hunting just because people are looking at the leaves. When it's not because they took priority, it's because some of the hunters maybe weren't as polite. So again, let's just keep it together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%, man. If you can, and it's not easy to do, and I'm guilty of not doing it, right? But stop, take a step back and look at the big picture. Are they out here appreciating nature? Does that benefit what I'm trying to do? It does, right? Versus somebody that's in the concrete jungle, never sees the light of day, and has no value for what's out here. And so we are at the biggest scale of it. We're on the same page with the same guy that might be competing for your hunting spot. The guy that rode his mountain bike through where you thought you had it all to yourself. Whatever that may be. At the end of the day, we're trying to accomplish the same stuff, which is keep what we have and make it better. Right? 100%. So yeah, I'm down with you 100% on that, man. United we stand, divided we fall.
Exactly. Last thing here, guys, right there. He's wearing the badge, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Officer. I know so many people that are so scared to talk to you in the woods. They're like, we have Onyx maps, we have scouting, you're watching these live feeds. I'm trying to give you all the answers. At the end of the day, you guys are out in the field more than anything. You're struggling, you have questions. You're driving around your truck. Everybody sees wildlife officers out there say, hey, man, I'm struggling. You got any advice? Where could I go? Should I even, look at this elevation? Look at that. More than anything, guys, these wildlife officers are your friends. They're your resource. They're there to help you increase that success. Do not be afraid of them, and feel free to ask the questions. You guys are always there to help out. So, Casey, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Absolutely awesome live feed. Again, we're out here on Instagram. This will go to our Instagram story, so it'll go to IGTV. So it will live there. So if you want to share this afterwards, the entire file will be there, so you can go to the IGTV on this page. You can share it to friends, watch it that way. You can re-watch it if you didn't get all the information tonight. So feel free there, and stay tuned. We'll be going roughly live 1 week prior to all of the Colorado big game seasons. So we have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff coming in the future, nights just like this. So again, thank you so much. We got Casey Westbrook, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'm Nate Zelinsky. This is the Big Game Hunting Series, brought to you by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Thank you for joining us.